I'm really delighted to be joined by some amazing speakers who will be talking about aspects of a changing world that you and I will all be facing. And I wanted to set the scene today for what you're about to hear. We are all living through a pandemic and learning to live with that, and an illness that at the moment has no cure. But parking to one side the health ramifications of that, it's probably been the single largest catalyst in social and business change that we have seen in a lifetime. And we're all going to be impacted by it in terms of how we live, how we socialize, and how we work. Yet it's also a unique opportunity to shape our futures and understand and prepare for the inevitable changes to aspects of our lives that we have taken for granted for a very long time. That's why we wanted to host today, to have a look at that bigger picture, the bigger digital agenda, and also projects that are happening in our region that will impact on all of us. For those of you who don't know, smart cities are, put very simply, it's where you use technology and data to create and shape a very different world that is more productive and conducive to our lifestyles. So things like IoT, 5G, drones, automation, robotics, massive machine learning, they're all out there and they're all happening. But now it seems that their relevance and their use has accelerated greatly. And we also will be examining some of our local factors that I talked about a moment ago. The Mayor and other key stakeholders across the region have prepared the Recharge the West Midlands plan, which is a £3 billion plus case to government to kickstart our economy, focusing in on a whole host of our key strengths, but digital is a big part of that. So if we're in agreement that our world is changing, I think it's now time to hand over to our speakers to explain exactly how that may happen. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Carl Beet, who is the Head of Transport Strategy and Intelligence at the West Midlands Combined Authority. A quick intro from Carl and some further questions. Over to you, Carl. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here. Great to do something again back in the business community, even in a digital way, which feels like it's been long overdue, and miss the, like many of you, probably the hustle and bustle of being in the city centre and being involved in events like this. So great to be able to connect to people, even if it's in a new way, and the sorts of thing we'll talk about now. So as been mentioned, Transport for West Midlands, we're the transport arm of the Combined Authority led by the Mayor, Andy Street. Mainly the 7 local authorities in the West Midlands Met area, so Birmingham, Solihull, Coventry, and the 4 Black Country authorities, as well as a range of partners covering LEPs, Chambers of Commerce, and so on. And in some ways, in terms of Transport for West Midlands, sometimes it's easier for clarity to talk about the things we don't do rather than the things we do. So we don't run the buses, National Express do that. We do run the tram in Birmingham, and many of you will have seen significant expansion of the tram in the city centre recently and currently down Broad Street. We play a significant role in developing new rail infrastructure, although we don't run the trains. We also play an important role in information, ticketing, marketing, and promoting transport in all of its forms across the Midlands. And really everything we do is about working in collaboration with operators and collaboration with local authorities. And our industry, like many, has seen a significant impact over the last few months. Someone who's been working for 17, 18 years now has been promoting people to change their habits, get out of the car, maybe get onto public transport. For the first time in my professional life, we've been working on campaigns that say, don't get on the train, don't get on the bus, please stay as safe as possible. So this period has been a significant challenge, as people will probably appreciate. And at the moment, we are doing our best to keep running what we would say is a safe and clean network as we can, that in particular is there for our key workers who are so important to keeping the economy going and making sure that those functions can happen. And like any business, as we think about what scenarios are going to be going forward, in all of our scenarios that we've looked at, public transport in particular is probably going to be at lower levels than it was pre the pandemic. and as has been mentioned in the intro, the way that we are working, living, everything that's happened recently, how much will that influence people going forward? Although the situation has obviously been a very challenging one, we recently did a survey with our customers, with our residents, and we had 6,200 responses to that. And one of the things that we asked is, what if anything, would you like to keep from the current situation? And from a transport perspective, the things that people mentioned were the cleaner air, the quieter roads, being able to go out walking, cycling, and so on. So there is an appetite for people to do that more. And we know that's not easy. It's related to what the weather's like, related to what people are doing that day, but we think there's a real opportunity there. And also, like many of us are doing now, a lot of people that have said that they have enjoyed the home working and would prefer to work in that way going forward. So from a transport point of view, there's an interesting challenge there around, we want the vibrancy of some of our city centres, town centres, employment locations to come back. It's important for the economy that those things happen, but also to benefit from some of the reduced impacts that the transport network has on our wider society: traffic accidents, air quality, carbon emissions, and so on. So all of these things have led us to start thinking about what a revised transport strategy might look like for our area. So we have a statutory local transport plan. It's one of the important roles that Transport for West Midlands has, to set out the plan of what we think transport will look like. And we've really started to look at, in many ways, it feels quite anachronistic now, that plan. So we're looking forward at what a new plan for transport could look like. And in that plan in particular, digital and technology probably plays a much greater role than it ever has done before. And without getting kind of too quasi-academic, we see it as a kind of triple access system. So accessibility in the traditional sense that we often talk about improving transport connectivity. So whether that's through road or rail, walking and cycling, bus and so on, but also thinking about how accessibility can be digital. So we're all doing exactly what we're all doing now. Can we reduce the need for some people to travel potentially by having these digital means of communicating with each other? And then the third aspect is making sure that we have access to facilities that are local to us where that's possible. So enabling people to make shorter journeys by being close to the facilities that they need, whether that's shopping or healthcare or so on. So our planning and our thinking about what the future of transport might look like has evolved significantly over the past few weeks as the markets and the behaviours that were in change. And whilst there were the positive aspects that people have referenced about enjoying some of those quieter streets and the better air quality and being able to be more active, which is an issue we have in the West Midlands, a lack of activity, particularly amongst some of our young people. There's also been some negatives about the fear of sharing, again, the fear of sharing space and sharing transport, and that again gives us some important areas and topics to think about and choose to tackle. From our perspective, one of the positives of where we are as a region is that we believe that we are leading the way in terms of innovation in the transport sector. This is a place where the automotive sector is particularly strong, and building on some of those strengths, we are one of the first places that's significantly trialling and testing connected autonomous vehicles. There's a test bed across Coventry, Solihull, Birmingham and bits of Warwickshire, where those vehicles are starting to be, or at least in progress of, will be tested on that network to see what benefits they could offer. We were announced as the UK's first future transport zone, which came with a little bit of cash from government, not as much as we'd like, but a little bit, and some additional powers. That's enabling us to do some of those things around really understanding our customers better, the data, being able to offer hopefully better services. It's also led to a quick discussion we're having before the meeting started. We're going to be an area, one of the first areas in the country to trial e-scooters. So a different form of technology, a way of moving people around, maybe more efficiently than previously, or a technology or a mode of transport that doesn't require sharing, which in the short term could be particularly important. We're a 5G area, which many people on this call will probably know more about than me, but it's particularly important for transport, you know, that the backbone of being able to transport this data quickly and efficiently so that we can have these new modes or new services work properly. We're also trialing other fairly innovative approaches, in particular around behaviour change, to try and get people to maybe leave their cars behind. Projects that we're doing with Coventry City Council around mobility credits. So if you trade in an old car, a potentially old polluting vehicle, you would be given an app with a bank account essentially on it that lets you spend money on either maybe a train ticket, a bus ticket, hiring a taxi, maybe hiring one of the e-scooters in the future, or hiring some of the cycles we're about to start to roll out in the next year or so. So we're taking the approach of thinking about how digital can help the transport network, help our communities, and help our citizens very, very seriously in our thinking going forward. We think it's a major strength that we have compared to other areas. And some of the big challenges that we've got around carbon, air quality, we think it can play a role in that. But we're very clear, I think, that the world that we're in now is definitely not the world it was before. Some of the traditional ways of running some of our transport services will need to be looked at. We don't have a commercial bus network anymore. The bus network, which was wholly there was some subsidy. We subsidised some socially necessary routes to the tune of about £9 million a year, but overall it is, you know, a largely commercial network. There are no commercial bus networks anymore. There simply isn't the patronage. We're going to have to really think about the services that we provide in the future, and innovation, digital and new ways of doing it will probably be a firm part of that. I don't want to go over my time, so I may well leave it there, but I'm happy for any questions, any comments, or any wider thoughts that people have got.
Very much, Carl. And do use that chat functions to get your questions through. I'm getting some directly, and I will be coming on to those in a moment. But before I do, I'd now like to invite our second speaker, Yannis, to take the stage. Yannis is the founder of Birmingham Tech Week, amongst many other things. Over to you, Yannis.
Thank you, Amardeep. Yeah, as Amardeep said, I am the founder of Birmingham Tech and Birmingham Tech Week, which took place last year. And as an organisation, it's great to be on this call, as we believe that kind of smart cities play such an important role in the digital transformation of the West Midlands and Birmingham. And a lot of our members are looking to kind of take advantage of that digitalisation and also opportunities that surrounds that as well. It's great to kind of hear what Carl and his team are doing at Transport the West Midlands. You know, that digital transformation around the transport network is going to kind of really enable people to move freely within the city and feel safer as well at the same time. So I just wanted to kind of build on what Carl was saying, really. And I think kind of, you know, right at the heart of all of this is really, first of all, the kind of hardware that sits around a smart city. So the electrification of roads, smart lighting, and also the sensors that enable this data to move freely and be shared across different networks as well. So it's really important that when we're kind of building new infrastructure, that we are making sure that it has the ability to become part of a smart city, but also looking at existing infrastructure as well and making sure that existing infrastructure has the ability to become part of the network as well. And that then, you know, creates the Internet of Things with big data platforms kind of really kind of powering them, and big software platforms as well. And I think for the first time now, we're living in a world where that's becoming more of a reality, especially with 5G and the West Midlands being a 5G testbed as well. That information is able to move quicker, it's able to be analysed quicker as well. And I just want to focus a little bit more on kind of big data for a minute, because I think that's kind of where this all comes to life, really. And I think there's a couple of things there. The first one is the ability to use predictive analytics to spot trends, understand what's going on in our environments, and make decisions quickly based on that information and insight. And that optimization and the ability to then create autonomous environments is really powered by kind of artificial intelligence and machine learning being part of these big data platforms. And that then leads to real-time decision-making, where we can start to, understand our environment, understand how both people and transport are interacting with that environment, and feed information back in so it's streamlined and has the ability to run smoother. But I think around all of that is trust. Consumers kind of want to know that if they're going to be sharing their information, which becomes a big part of the smart city, that it's going to be handled in the right way. So cybersecurity needs to play a big role in our smart cities. But I think more than anything, it's the democratization of data. It's enabling our data to be shared with our communities so people know what's going on, but also organizations that play a role in this as well. So those organizations can make decisions and optimize their services that they're offering as part of that environment as well. And that obviously leads to environmental benefits, because we're going to see a reduction in energy usage, because we know, where in the city and where in the region energy needs to be provided, and where it's not needed at times where it's quieter than usual. And we can monitor air quality so that we can make, again, decisions and quickly respond to that. And of course, enhancements to mobility, improve safety around that, and better connected transport links. And I think a big part of it also is the cost of living. We've got to make it appealable for people to want to come back into the cities. There was a McKinsey report from 2019 that predicted that 60% of people would be living in cities by 2030. I'm not sure that's still going to be the case. I think Carl mentioned this fear of going back into those environments, of being in too close proximity to other people. And that's something as a society we've got to understand, and we've got to adapt around as well. So I think that we've got to make it appealing. And I think one of the ways we can do that is understanding how people are using our cities. And I think there's going to be a hybrid mix of people actually using urban environments to conduct work, but actually wanting to kind of also work in their home environment, maybe living outside the city, or maybe actually a mix of both. And I think, as we emerge into this world of almost pay as you live, we've had pay as you go, we've had pay as you travel. I think now it's everything as a service, essentially. As a consumer, you want to be able to decide how you're interacting with the smart city as and when you wish to do so. And I think that is then going to see some real innovation. We're going to get charging on the move. We're going to have the ability to kind of check in and out of both home environments and office environments as well. And I think that overlay of augmented reality as well. So there's this layer of information at our fingertips to enable us to make better decisions as well. So yeah, fascinating times, and I'm kind of really keen to see how kind of Birmingham and West Midlands takes advantage of some of these opportunities and some of the innovation that sits around it.
Thanks very much, Jan. I think what really struck me when you were speaking, if we were having this conversation, 6 months ago, all of those pieces of technology were already out there, but we'd probably be using them in a very different way. And it just goes to show how quickly our world has transformed. But thank you very much for that kind of really fascinating insight into some of those technology advancements that are happening all around us, perhaps in a very different way than they were just a few months ago. Absolutely. And now to our final panelist, if that's okay, handing over to Nigel, who is the Managing Director of Impact Aerial Limited. And I think you may have some slides for us as well, Nigel. I'm not sure if they're going to...
I do have some slides, so hopefully you can see those, guys.
Yes.
Just make sure that people can see on my screen. I'm cheating a bit, aren't I, really? Because I'm the only one with slides, but it's mostly because I've got a lot of things I'd like to talk about, and I needed something to make me remember what it was I wanted to say. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Amardeep. Thanks to the guys. My name's Nigel Pugh. I'm the founder and the CEO of a business called Impact Aerial, and we're a drone professional services business I'll come on to that a little bit further in my presentation about what it is we actually do. I like to try and tell people that we do fun things with drones. That's essentially what we do, but it's a bit more deep than that when we get into it. I thought I'd have a little bit of a history lesson about what cities are first. And I thought it was important that we all remember back to why cities were created. So they are, first and foremost, places where people come together. Yeah. And I wanted to say myself again, hi, Nigel Pugh, and we're talking about smart cities, but I've done that already. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about my business, Impact Aerial, drone professional services company. We're based in Birmingham. What we actually do generally is surveys of obviously the city and other cities as well. But we collect geospatial data about what we're actually observing with the drones that we fly. And I'll come on to that. And again, I wanted to underline it with more of what cities are today. And I wanted to do a little bit of a history lesson again about the background to cities. I'm not sure if any of you know this, but cities were started over 7,000 years ago. And the cities that we know today, the way they work today, have been around since 3,500 BC. That amazed me. I didn't even realize that. So I educated myself there. And then it's important to understand why cities exist. And that is, a city features the ability for it to trade. So whether it's raw materials, goods and services, financial services, stock shares, currency, that's what a city is. That's what we're talking about. So now we have to talk about what makes a smart city. And we're talking about, as Yannis mentioned, the digital world, the Internet of Things, everything happening that's connected in some way to data and the ability to share that data. So we're talking about a digitally connected city where at the core, the networks that power people's businesses, organizations, allow them to do worldwide connections and trading via the internet, and even all the way to the traffic systems that keep our cities moving and flowing. And I'm going to come on to that as well. So a true city, we believe, and this is one of the things that we do where we collect data, is a connected and a collaborative city. It's a city that creates and contains vast amounts of data. It's also a city where that data is shared. Today, a lot of businesses, some businesses choose not to share that data. That's changing. We've seen a sort of sea change in the way the city thinks and what it thinks about the data it collects and holds. But we'd like to think that a smart city is going to benefit from when that data is shared with everybody. So our vision, once again, is the collaborative city, but a city that forms a connected, complementary ecosystem. What do we mean by that ecosystem? It's the process of where the data is shared. And once that data is shared, it has a value, but that value increases every time the data is shared. And every time there's a package of data added, it becomes much greater. And I've said that I believe it becomes the greater than the sum of its parts. So here we are at Impact Aerial, we are drone operators, and we are collecting that data. So we are effectively the creators of that data. And we refer to that as the source feedstock. So I wanted to try and visualize for everybody what can happen when we've captured that data from our drones. So drone data is geospatial. That means it's aware of what it's looked at, where it is in terms of altitude and attitude, which gives you a great deal of extra information over normal mapping, normal representation of the city. So imagine having access to all of that data and the depth of that data that allows us to create a digital twin of the city. And imagine what a digital twin of Birmingham City could represent. We recently did some work about traffic flows. So we were looking at the inbound routes. This was before COVID, I must say. The inbound routes along from Spaghetti down the Aston Expressway. But imagine if you could geographically and theoretically represent that data and the data flows as a digital twin, and then be able to monitor that data and manipulate that data, because I think Yannis mentioned about live real-time data. Live real-time data is the future. It's where we're going to go. And drone captured data, of course, is near real-time. But if the drones are in the air and they're constantly flying and they're constantly observing whatever it is that we've chosen to observe, that gives you real-time data. It's very, very valuable data. So we feel this is the future of cities today. This is what smart cities and digital cities are all about. It's actually happening here and now. We do it on a regular basis. That's our job, is to collect the data and then give it to the guys that we see here and other businesses as well. And we'd love to try and help other people. So if you want us to come along and partner, we'd love to have a conversation. Now, my final couple of slides, I want to have a bit of a picture. It's always nice to have a picture. what drones see when they're in a city. It's not our city, I hasten to add. I think it's one of Dubai in actual fact, because I can see the Burj Khalifa there. But when drones are working in cities, of course, they have the advantage of being at an altitude and a greater observation of what they're looking at. What you're seeing there is a head-up display from one of the drones and the data it's capturing, which is being fed back to a live console and then potentially fed back to a live central information gathering control center. There is one issue, well, there are multiple issues, and this is what's being addressed at the moment by the drone community, and that is the ability for drones to be self-aware, to fly themselves, but also then to be safe when they're flying themselves in a city. So we do that by creating UTM, so travel space, for the drones to fly. And there are lots of companies, and we're working with some of those companies, how to actually do that. So you make sure you're detecting and avoiding buildings, for example. You're also flying between the areas that you're no longer allowed to fly because of restrictions, but also flying in safe corridors. And that was really it. And that was mine in a summary. Quite a brief one. There's a lot to take in. 10 minutes probably isn't enough, but we really appreciate it. So I want to say thank you very much to the team at Trowers, to Amardeep and Abby. Thanks very much again. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Nigel. I've had some questions come in both to me directly and in the general chat. And perhaps if we can go to some of those questions now, if that's okay. Coming to you, Carl, first. You talked about the new plan for transport given the pandemic. Have you projected how long it may take for where we were previously to become back on track? So how significant do you think the impact of the pandemic will be? For how long will it be felt in terms of our public transport systems was the first question.
Yes, it's a good and it's a good question, and one that is probably almost impossible to answer. Which is why it's a good question. So we've done some scenario testing. I mean, the key factor is when a vaccine comes along, which we don't know the answer to. But even with or without a vaccine, the longer it takes, the longer people's habits build and their behaviours can stick. So based on where we are now, we've done some kind of scenario testing over the next 18 months, and it's essentially on an axis of how good or bad the economy is, and then how willing or unwilling people are to go back to what they were doing before or to share. And in all of those scenarios, for public transport in particular, it's lower. As people's employment situation changes, as that need or want to share space, whether it's on rail or bus or tram, goes down. There are some more positive scenarios where people are working from home more and going out walking and cycling more, which is great, which is where we'd like it to be, where we get a carbon and air quality benefit. And there's some scenarios that fall into, let's just call them the high carbon recovery, where we have very high car ownership already in the West Midlands, sort of 70% or so, where people are likely to go back into their cars. And the big enemies, not cars per se, it's single occupancy car journeys, and in particular short single occupancy car journeys, which we still have an awful lot of in the Midlands. So I don't think we will ever get quite back to where it was before. That's not necessarily a bad thing if some of the behaviour changes are positive in terms of people making use of new digital technologies, working from home more potentially. We also acknowledge a lot of people, in these kind of conversations, it's obvious to say working from home. There are many, many people across all sorts of industries that can't work from home. It would be impossible for them. So we need to still make sure that there is a functioning, safe and secure transport network that they can use. So I don't think we'll ever go back to where we were before. We could come out of it in a positive way. The current data that we've got at the moment, as of kind of this week, suggests that road traffic is creeping back up at about 75-85%. Bus 35 to 40, similar for tram, train very low at about 20. Cycling is up a lot. If you were to map cycling use from some of the sensors we've got on the network, and we haven't got enough, that's one of the things we're trying to roll out quickly at the moment, and you map cycling use and you mapped it against the weather, you would see a very strong correlation between how much people cycle and how sunny it is outside. So we do need a resilient transport network that works in all conditions and for all users. So I don't think we'll get back to where we were before, but the future's not completely determined, and we do have an influence over it. So we'll see how that plays out.
Thank you very much, Carl. Now turning to the general chat, actually. Starting off with the first, again for you, Carl. Many thanks. You know what all transport-related data is available to private companies to access, so innovative services can be developed on top of that data layer? And what is the process to make the services available to the public through your organisation?
So we are keen on our principle is that it should be public, it should be open where we have it. As an organisation, a lot of the data we get actually comes from other places. So the local authorities provide us their traffic information. We're working through with them at the moment the process of how we actually do share more, because there's multiple agreements needed between who's produced it and what we can and can't do with it. But our principle is if we've got it, we should be sharing it. We're a local government body and people should have it. We do have a website, Data Insight at Transport for West Midlands, and we have some APIs on that. From, again, our point of view, is a really interesting conversation to have about. I don't really want some of my guys making apps and things like that, as an example, in one area where there's a load of brilliant people out there that will do it far better with the data that we've got. On the same token, I also don't want to lose the relationship we have with our customers and users that look to us for information as a trusted source of information as a local government body. But the principle is we should be making what we've got as available and as open as possible within the realms of the data agreements that we've got. As I say, much of it does come from other people. The nature of the deregulated UK transport network, I mean, we don't actually have that much bus data. It's National Express. We're a commercial company. We go and collect information at the stops with customers. What happens on board, a lot of that is their information. It's not ours to share. Tram, much better. We own and operate the tram, so there's no reason why we can't share that data. So in terms of creating an integrated approach, it can be a bit of a mixed bag actually across all these many partners, but we are working towards that, and the principle is it should be available where possible.
Great. And anecdotally, we've just been working on a project with TfWM actually on a data aggregator, very specifically for autonomous vehicles, but looking at different data sets and aggregating them in one place for public and private exploitation. I think we'll be speaking more about that when that project completes in the next few months. Yannis, there was a question that came through directly to me around digital and the increase that may have, the impact that may have on mental health due to the increased impact on isolation. If we're not interacting with people, if we're too reliant on digital, is digital really the answer? Or actually, could it be a double-edged sword, was the question.
I think like most things, it's a balance. You know, I like most people have got Zoom fatigue. And, you know, digital has become kind of a necessity in the world we live in. But, you know, I'm craving, like most people are, the ability to once again interact in a personal, human way. And I think that does play a role on mental health. And I think we need to better educate people on the pitfalls of being too switched on all the time. So that is something that I think we all have a responsibility of, and it starts with our young people, but it goes all the way through the generations really. But I think, yeah, we're going to live in a hybrid world where, you know, digital is going to be an important integral part of the lives we lead. But I think it almost needs to feel almost a part of kind of the real world. So it's that overlay of information as opposed to, you know, you picking up the device and always being kind of focused on it. It almost becomes a seamless transition, and you're not aware that digital is playing a role in your everyday life. For instance, you know, the car you drive will be using digital to make decisions, you know, small microscopic automation without you even knowing that. Your home will make adjustments using digital and technology, again, without you even know that that's going on. And that will benefit you from a cost-saving point of view. It will benefit the environment. And also kind of, using digital for good as well. There are platforms out there that obviously are focusing on mental health and how to support people. But I think we need a balance, really. And I think that's why cities can play such an important role. It gives people the opportunity to kind of go and immerse in an environment with other people, to interact, to collaborate, to communicate, to engage, but also then to have the ability to step away and to go into other environments where, it might be better suited to kind of mental health as well.
Thanks, Yannis. And actually, in the general chat, there's also a question that is directed to you around cybersecurity. The protection of personal data is a significant concern and growing for many people. How do we reassure people that data is secure? Do you think people will develop an awareness of the risks and democratization of data that will be a reality? And actually, there was another one directly to me along the same vein. Should we be putting everything out there? And do we actually know what we're really putting out there already? So, a combination of issues around inadvertent data releasing, but also how that is then employed and what can we do to keep ourselves safe?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. And again, one that's almost impossible to answer. But I'll give it a go. So I think, first of all, kind of, the bedrock of a smart city has to encompass cybersecurity, because people need to be reassured that the right things are in place so that when data is shared, especially if that's personal information, that is going to be anonymized and that is going to be secure. So that's first and foremost. But the challenge isn't necessarily that, you have things like cybersecurity in place to protect people's data, because actually with Cambridge Analytica, with GDPR, people have become more aware of their data being manipulated and used in ways that they, probably don't agree with, and, in some cases, extreme cases, isn't ethical. And that's caused kind of consumer behavior to push back against the sharing of data and the sharing of information. We've only got to kind of look at the kind of COVID tracking app as a kind of case in point there, right? People, know that it's for their own benefit. They know that actually being able to share their information on who they've interacted with, where they've gone, will ultimately save people's lives. But actually it's a trade-off. It's actually, I'm giving away my personal information. And we've seen so many people that have downloaded the app and then quickly deleted it again because they don't feel reassured that their data is going to be handled in the right way. So I suppose the question is to all of that, how do we overcome this, right? And I think how we overcome it is by doing small kind of micro test beds of data sharing. So one great example would be healthcare. If we can kind of show people that if they give small bits of information about their health, about how they're, what fitness routines they're taking part in, their heart rate, whatever it may be, and feel trusted enough, and trust is built over time, of course, so we need to kind of take an iterative approach to this, that their GP services and the hospitals and the NHS can provide better services back to them that are preventative, not reactive to when someone gets ill. That's when we'll start to see people become more willing to share their data and information, I believe. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to start from a point, especially with smart cities, where actually we use people's data and then guess what? The first thing we do is we find someone. We find someone because we know that they've kind of crossed a barrier, for instance, within the green zone, and they haven't informed someone. For me, we shouldn't go to that point straight away. What we should do is educate people. And we should kind of tell people how we're using their data, how we're improving services. Now, of course, fines will play a part in it, and there will be policing around data. That's inevitable. But what we don't want to do is create a big brother state, because that Orwellian kind of view on the world is something that people are more and more aware of right now. And we've just got to be careful. So for me, it's focusing on the positives. Let's improve people's lives. Let's build trust over time. And in doing so, people will be more willing to share their data, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Thank you, Yannis. And actually, just leaning in a little bit into that question for you, Nigel, you are capturing data inadvertently, perhaps images that may be sensitive or potentially sensitive. Does that crop up? And what steps do Impact Aerial take with regard to those images that they are securing?
Again, it's another one of those really great questions with virtually no direct answer to it. So a lot of the data that we capture, almost contrary to what I said earlier on about sharing the data, is often subject to an NDA. So we've been asked not to share the data because it's unique to the people that have asked us to collect the data. And you do have to be careful, particularly in concentrated city areas. For example, if we are capturing just normal data, maybe of a park that would include, mothers with their children, probably before the COVID situation happened, then we have to do something about it. You have to make sure that either the people on the ground are informed. So we do a lot of information requests up front to say, do you have any objection to the data that might be filmed today by a drone being captured? And then potentially you may be part of that, either photography or film or the data set that's produced. Generally, you don't get that many people complain about it if you ask them and you're very upfront and say that data is going to be shared. But more often than not, the large scale data projects we're doing, where we're doing mapping, where we're doing what we call point clouds. So it's effectively a three-dimensional representation of a building, for example. The tall building, I always get the number wrong. Is it 102 Colmore Row, for example? That would be a great example to be able to map from a point cloud point of view, because you'll be able to virtually tour the building at its most extreme heights. In that situation, there won't be very many circumstances where you'd be exposing an individual's data because they may be on top of that building, for example, or in one of the windows. But you do have to be careful. But I think it's to Yannis's point, you have to make sure that the data that's being shared is, you either have the consent or the trust. The trust has to come up front by asking for permission, also for seeking a better way of sharing the data without actually sharing people's individuals. In reality, in the 6 years that we've been doing it, I don't think we've ever been questioned about we don't want you to share our data. It's something we don't want to do. The public park instance is a good example, because I know that Carl mentioned about Coventry, for example. We did quite a lot of work to promote the outdoor spaces for Coventry and the Neaton. And of course, at that time, there were lots of people in the parks, and we were filming, as I said, children playing on swings and roundabouts and that type of thing. And we didn't really have any major issues. A lot of it comes down to how you actually present the data that you've captured, and often also how you capture the data as well. There are ways of getting around it. Ultimately, if somebody objects, then you're going to have to do something about blanking out, a little bit like Google do with car registrations and numbers of houses, and that can be done. But like I said, in all the years we've been doing, we've never had a major issue. So I don't think it's that as bad as people perceive.
That's good to hear. Thank you very much. Carl, there was a question that came into me. Are you changing your capital investment plans based on the pandemic? And does the level of investment anticipated previously, is it still justified? If I can ask you to turn to that question. What immediately sprang to my mind was how Nigel opened his conversation by saying cities have been around for millennia, and actually, they've clearly survived through previous pandemics. So, I imagine capital infrastructure and investment will carry on, because this is more of a blip than anything else. But would welcome your response to that question.
It's a good question. It's one that we've been thinking about. So the current projects that are in train are carrying on as they were. We think that's important, again, to be ready for when we recover and come out of the pandemic. So the metro routes that are currently under construction in Birmingham city centre, and one that will be has just started, that goes through Dudley town centre and onto Merry Hill. They are carrying on as we anticipated them. And whilst it may take a bit of time for things to come back, and they may not come back the same, we do think there'll be enough demand for some of those transport systems that we're putting in. But it definitely does make us think. It also makes us think about, as we talked about, how people use cities and the different ways that people travel. We've spent an awful lot of money and investment in our city and town centres. And I suppose one of the arguments you could make is maybe we need to do some more stuff locally, more stuff in suburbs and in the kind of the second tier down centres as well, so people can benefit from local trips as much as a big focus on the city and town centres. I mean, Birmingham has had tremendous investment in it from the private sector and also the public sector through New Street and the tram extension and so on. So the projects that we've got in train at the moment, we think we need to be prepared for the recovery, which we hope will happen. When a vaccine does arrive, people will then feel more confident travelling, and we need to be in the right place. We don't want to actively encourage a high carbon recovery, which will by not providing public transport as an example in particular, that will be kind of sending the message that it's okay to drive everywhere. But we probably do need to, and I think we will in our new strategy, think about the balance between where we invest and the type of things we invest in. There'll also be some short-term impacts, I think, on construction costs and delivery that will come up. Materials are harder to get at the moment, different working practices being put in place. So there's a lot for us to think about. I mean, we still also have HS2 coming, which is making a big impact, one of the biggest infrastructure projects in Europe, and we benefit from that significantly. And how that influences those kind of shape of the city over not the next 2 or 3 years, but 20, 30, 40 years will also be interesting.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. There is a question that's come in, which I will read out and perhaps have a go at it first, and then invite my colleagues to have a go if that's okay. It's about emissions. And back in the day, there were concerns around emissions from radio frequencies, from mobile phones, and the effect on the bodies. With more and more wireless product services, is the emission concern likely to rear its head again? And how do we get this managed? Yannis, if I have a go at this, and perhaps you can come in. So, there was, when the pandemic got going in its early stages, a conspiracy that actually it was linked to 5G. That was roundly, with really detailed evidence, proved to be incorrect. And actually, there were real concerns around the way that social media was used to kind of abuse, fact checking, etc. But at the heart of that, there was this concern that radio waves, 5G waves, were impacting on health detrimentally, and we had a whole host of bodies around the world, including WHO, NHS, all come out and actually say, no, there is no concern with regard to the use of this technology and the impact of on our health. Now, the question that's been asked is probably a little bit broader than that. It's I suppose, all of these little connected devices that we have all emit something, and the more that we have of those devices emitting more and more, is there a concern? From my perspective, there isn't anything out there that's indicated that volume has an impact. But it is a genuine question, and all the data that I'm aware of has indicated that there isn't anything to be concerned about. There is a lot to the contrary, but a lot of that has proven to be incorrect on a number of levels. So I don't think there is anything that's concrete out there at the moment that shows either use of technology or the volume of those items that we've got that are relying on those technology detrimentally impact on health. But welcome thoughts from our other speakers. Yannis, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. We've got to be really careful with these kind of conversations because, ultimately, we have to rely on kind of the data and kind of people who are, I guess, much better placed than us to provide us with the reassurance that these aren't problems. I guess the problem is we live in a post-truth world. So, what do you believe anymore? You know, data at its root cause can be manipulated. You know, we know that. We know that there's research papers out there that have been manipulated at the, you know, the point of creation, and then used to create conspiracy theories and manipulate people. So I think that it's a challenge, and one that really big tech and the social media companies have to step up and play a role in. Because, you know, if we know that information is being shared which isn't factually correct, then, you know, they have a responsibility, in my opinion, to, you know, call that out and flag it. Now, I think they're getting better, but they've got a long way to go. And we're talking kind of, you know, of course, Facebook and Twitter here, and then obviously Instagram and WhatsApp from Facebook's point of view, and also TikTok and the emergence of that as well. So it's a big challenge. It really is a big challenge. I think it comes back to sharing information, actually, and that real time kind of democratization of data. Because if we can kind of show people, for instance, what the levels of emissions are from these devices and provide that to the public freely, then hopefully that will go some way to reassuring people that there isn't an issue. But of course, if those do rise, again, we all have a responsibility to call it out and say, why? Why is that happening? You know, the problem is we just don't know, do we? There's been so many times in history where we've thought that we have got something right, and actually, to the contrary, it's not been great. And, you know, in some cases, it's caused lots of problems. So I just think we have to kind of, you know, use technology with an air of caution and make sure that we all play a responsibility in understanding the role it does play.
Thanks, Yannis. And Nigel, a question that has come in for you, but did you have any thoughts on that before I ask the question?
I think Yannis has covered it well, because there has been a lot of misinformation about. Clearly, you know, in our role, we do a lot of collecting of data, which requires a transmission subsystem. So we're using fairly high-powered RF backwards and forwards for the data transmission between the drone and the collecting point. And I always say this to people, you know, that the conspiracy theory has been around for years, hasn't it, about people getting cancer from mobile phones. And do any of us, even today, know anybody that has ever been, you know, had an illness caused by a mobile phone, or you couldn't even prove it? So there's a lot of it is probably hearsay. And as you said, a lot of the very well respected organisations dissed everything to do with 5G and the fact that it might you know, have a detrimental effect on people's health and welfare. In fact, today, you know, we're part of one of the 5G trials. We're doing live surveys, effectively live surveys, using a 5G infrastructure network. And I think it's not even a question of, is it going to be a risk? It's a question of that everybody needs more access to data because of everything that we're talking about today. And that should really be the least of our concerns. So yeah, I think that was my point to the question of Yannis, and Yannis covered it better than I did.
Thank you. Thanks, Nigel. I think my RSI may be down to my iPhone. So,
yeah, maybe. That's a different thing, yeah.
But turning to the question that was that had come in, Nigel, you started your talk by saying that cities were essential for trade. Given the shift to e-commerce and announcements such as the close of John Lewis in Birmingham and Tamworth, do you think cities are essential for trade anymore?
It's a really good question, isn't it? I think Carl made a great point about trying to get people back into cities, because, you know, personally, you know, I've lived and worked in the city and around the city of Birmingham for 40 years, and prior to the COVID-19 situation, I personally felt really good about the health and wealth of the city. It was a nice place to be. You know, Yannis's fantastic initiative last year for the tech event, it brought lots of us together, and we all agreed that what was really good about Birmingham was how good it felt, a great place to be, you know, a great place to eat out, to drink, go to bars. If ever that happens again, I'd love to know it happens soon, properly. But it was also about people coming together and doing business with each other. So trading, you know, my story was not really about, I wasn't really talking about trading, you know, trading one-to-one in selling stocks and shares, but everything that we do, you know, from walking down the high street to seeing a nice pair of shoes in a shop, there is a whole infrastructure behind that, and it's the way that the city works. The city works by people coming together, and then you have in collective areas of people with certain skill sets, so insurance companies, advisors, businesses like your own, Amardeep, Trowers. They tend to build their businesses in city centres because people come to those centres because they want the collected power that's actually there. And I do hope we get back to that. I sincerely do, because personally, I love working in and around the city. I love the vibe. I love the way HS2 has brought more investment into the city. You can feel that excitement. So I hope it doesn't stop, and I hope that that COVID hasn't changed it. So as much as I don't like hearing about losing great stores like John Lewis, I hope it doesn't affect the way businesses trade.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Nigel. And yeah, having worked, I've been at Trowers for quite a long time. I've spent 10 in London and the rest in Birmingham. There is such a convenience about cities. There is so much that can be done through co-locating lots of people together. That's an intrinsic factor of why cities are essential. And I'm totally biased as well. I thought Birmingham Tech and Birmingham Tech Week were amazing. This isn't a question that's coming in, but I do want to ask it of you, Yannis, not to preempt our board meeting that's happening very soon. But what are the plans this year for Birmingham Tech in the context of everything that's going on around the pandemic?
Yeah, so we've obviously had a challenge in trying to work out what we should do and how we do it. And I think, we have opted for a digital event that's going to take place in October. But I think more and more what I want to encourage, and what was a big part of Birmingham Tech Week last year, was these community events, which I believe can still take place within the city environment. But again, we have to tread carefully and make sure that we have lots of things taken into consideration with that. So we not just observing social distancing, because that for me, it might not even be in place by then. We're already at the point where it's +1 meter, whatever that means. But I believe now it's about kind of the psychology of people. Making it feel safe to go back into those environments, to network, to collaborate. But I do want those events to be encouraged and still take part, because ultimately Birmingham Tech and Birmingham Tech Week was founded on the principle of collaboration and community. And the city, as Nigel mentioned, is such a wonderful environment to engage with people in and around. So I wouldn't want to lose that. But at the same time, I think the core element of Birmingham Tech Week this year will be a series of keynotes that are delivered digitally, because you can imagine a lot of the people we're interacting with need to be reassured, which option we're going with, and digital has just been the one that we know can happen regardless of what may happen. So yeah, lots to consider, and then we're also evolving as well. So a lot of people know us for Birmingham Tech Week, of course, and that was our launch pad. But we're now evolving into almost a kind of mini version of Tech Nation or UK Tech, but focused on the West Midlands and Birmingham. To connect to kind of the private and public sector, but also to provide, a platform for people to be able to collaborate, engage with one another, find out what's going on, find out where to go, what services are available, what opportunities are available, and also kind of foster that community better as well. And give people a platform for success. Some wonderful things going on in Birmingham and West Midlands. We've heard from what Nigel's doing today. We've heard what Carl and his team are doing, but I believe we need to do a better job of telling people that. And I think that's where kind of places like Bristol and Manchester have done a phenomenal job. They've got the narrative together and they've told the world what their story is all about. We need to be better at that. So that's kind of a personal mission that I'm on right now. But one, again, that's not going to happen overnight.
No, absolutely. And like I said, I'm very biased, and I think that the stuff that Birmingham Tech has been doing has been amazing in just helping create that narrative. Actually, Yannis, I'm going to turn to you for the next question as well. I'm going to summarise it. essentially, I think it's focusing on the digital divide, that the people who are tech savvy and people who aren't tech savvy. Do you think those that aren't tech savvy are going to be left behind and find it harder to get jobs?
Well, I think as a society, we've got a big role to play in this. So I sit on the Combined Authorities Digital Skills Partnership Board, and that's because it's something very, very close to my heart. I believe that kind of digital and digital skills need to be provided to every one of us, regardless of what stage you're at. People are going to need those digital skills to operate in this new world. And we need to reach for people in the most deprived areas and the people that are most vulnerable. The fact that still in this day and age, some people haven't got access to high-speed internet, or internet at all, sorry, not just high-speed internet, the internet at all. They're not connected. Some households in some of our most deprived areas of the region haven't got devices. They haven't got mobile phones. They haven't got computers. So first of all, we need to get the equipment in quickly. And then we need to provide people with skills to either upskill if you are, coming from a job that may have not been digital. We need to provide those people with reskilling opportunities. And that's why stuff like School of Code, Code Your Future is those initiatives are playing such an important role. But we need to do more, and we need to be better at it, because people will get left behind. And I really do not want people to get left behind, because technology and digital is such a powerful thing. But we need to kind of make sure that the right people get access to it.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Yannis. The next question is for you, Nigel. Nigel, just going back to the conversation that you said around the data that you were capturing and that you hadn't experienced any issues with it. The question is, did you feel that was predominantly because that data was unstructured? And do you see any change in that lack of objection if that unstructured data is accessible through new tech tools?
I think the answer to the question is probably very much so. That's the reason why we haven't had an issue so far, possibly because of the way we collect the data, possibly because of the way that we go out of our way to make sure that we're not breaching people's privacy. But also, it's exactly true that as we go forwards, the more unstructured data being accessible to a wider audience, there may be issues around that. If you look at the COVID example as a real world example, in some cities, I won't mention which ones they are, it's not one of ours, drones have been used to recognise, use an AI pattern to recognise individuals that may be at risk, they may be a carrier of COVID-19, and to track those individuals. Now, you could say that is a breach of that individual's privacy, but it is also a very accurate method of tracking and tracing somebody who is potentially at risk and potentially risking the wider audience. So that's a question of morality, isn't it? How do we do it? Do we make sure that we do it sensitively, or make sure that the data is shared properly and then still kept private when it's not put out in the public domain? It's very interesting what you can do with data. So one of our projects, we've created a software platform, an AI platform for recognizing invasive species. And that's Japanese knotweed, invasive species like that, that grow very fast, because you want to stop those damaging the infrastructure. We're actually doing it within a rail environment because it loves, Japanese knotweed as an example, loves ballast, and it loves to grow there very quickly. Again, of course, we're not invading anyone's privacy when it comes to looking at Japanese knotweed, but we are using an AI model to recognize and differentiate different types of invasive species. So the conspiracy theorists could say, well, hang on a second, those same tool sets that we're talking about there could be used to recognize certain people, people that might be displaying potentially violent behavior in the city, and they might be at risk. Now, personally, I think that's not a bad idea. If you do have people who are, hell-bent on terrorists, for example, doing something, you can actually track those people, and you can use an AI data model, and the drone data captures is a very good way of tracking those people, because if we could stop people like the Manchester bomber before they actually enter the city and prevent I'd rather that happen and be less concerned about the fact that we're breaching people's data privacy. From the data perspective that we use, I think Carl mentioned something earlier on about the self-driving car programs, or the self-driving vehicles. I forget which it was, Carl. So we're working with a major vehicle manufacturer for their self-driving car, and we're monitoring the data on various motorways, and more importantly, various motorway junctions. That's quite important, because when you're trying to teach a self-driving car how to drive, you've got to teach it all of the things that we forget that we learned as children before we went to drive. And that is it safe to step out into a road when there's a 70-mile-an-hour car coming? A data set, a model, doesn't know that, and you have to feed it with lots and lots of data into the IR model. Is that a breach of anyone's data? Could be. We're looking at flows of traffic. We're looking at vehicles merging from junctions from a main road, a dual carriageway onto a motorway. Clearly, that's going to cover all sorts of different types of transport. It might be commercial transport. It might be just ordinary people's transport. There are issues around data privacy there, but there are equally great benefits in collecting that data and analysing it, and then presenting it as a data set that can be used, as Carl said, for devices that can work in the city. So I think the potential risks and disadvantages of capturing data that you don't want people to share is far outweighed by the advantage of actually collecting that data in the first place. There's a long way of going around answering the question, but I think that's where that question came from about unstructured data.
No, it's a very good answer, actually. Carl, I've had a couple of questions that I'm going to direct at you. The first is around increased car data. You mentioned that's gone back to, not too far from where it was pre-COVID. Do you think that road infrastructure can be warranted going forward, given the impact that cars have shown to have on the environment? And if we want a green recovery, would actually road infrastructure be something that we should be considering investing in? And also there was a question around the impact that an associated question around autonomous vehicles. Now, could they also be employed if they don't use petrol or diesel to increase to benefit the environment in a greater way? So two kind of questions related to the impact on the environment, reducing investment in road infrastructure, and also you looking at autonomous vehicles, but not of the type that we would associate that with. So the cars, etc., but looking at different types of autonomous vehicles that will be beneficial for transport and the environment.
Yeah, it's so in terms of the transport sector and its contribution to carbon, it's a good place to start as any. Transport makes up about a third of our carbon output. And sadly, over the last 10 or more years, other sectors have improved their carbon output. Transport hasn't, it's basically stayed flat. So whilst vehicle manufacturers have made better engines, we tend to put them in bigger, taller, arguably uglier cars, which are very popular at the moment. And there has been a take-up of EVs, but it's probably not been as fast as we'd like. That being said, the private car is appropriate for many circumstances for driving people, getting them to the things they need to get to. Again, it's more the single occupancy car journeys in the wrong locations that I think are kind of the biggest thing to tackle first. And we should also remember that our roads don't just carry cars. We have cyclists on our roads. We have our buses on the roads, and they perform an important part of our streetscapes. But within that third that we contribute towards carbon as a whole, the private car is then the biggest contributor. So both cars and some LGVs, HGVs, heavy goods vehicles as well. So we do seriously need to think about what we do to mitigate that. Some of our local authority partners, Birmingham in particular, have been very bold about some of the things they would choose to do and how they would allocate the road space we've got. So not necessarily adding any more to our highways, keeping the highway network as it is and well maintained, but how you use that space, whether you use that space for private car or walking and cycling or buses or other forms of transport, e-scooters that we talked about, is an important debate to have. We historically used to build things that really kind of catered for the peaks in the morning and the evening. The other thing we're seeing from our traffic analysis at the moment is those peaks aren't as pronounced at the moment. There isn't a very intense AM peak anymore. It's much flatter as people travel at different times. And there's a role for the business community to play as well in being a bit more flexible in terms of when people need to travel, where they're working and how they're working. So I wouldn't rule out a complete kind of blanket ban on highway infrastructure. There'll be some pinch points where it's important. We do need to have a well-maintained and safe network, and then we need to think about how we use that network so it doesn't have to all be used by cars. The second part was about connected and autonomous vehicles, if I remember correctly. The connected bit is very important. It's kind of the bit that people often forget about. They go straight into the kind of future and the cars will drive themselves, and isn't that great? Connected bit is very important to us, gives us an awful lot of data again, so it gives us ability to understand how we might manage the network better. So as cars communicate between themselves, potential safety benefit or an efficiency benefit, but also how those vehicles communicate with roadside infrastructure that lets us know what's going on that network, you know, when are people traveling, how many, and so on, which I think is often overlooked. The autonomous element is potentially very useful as we think about being more efficient in how we use the transport system. Again, vehicles can potentially, especially freight, could travel closer together, so you wouldn't need as many of the spaces that you would need to leave at the moment. And it does also give us the ability, if we think about what public transport looks like in the future, and the difficulties at the moment of funding that public transport, you know, it's very labour intensive and costly. If there's a different way of doing it using autonomous vehicles, then potentially there's a market there that could help, both from a social inclusion aspect but also from an environmental aspect. The fact that if they're electric and autonomous and efficient, they could well provide a role for some of the areas where we currently basically serve them in the way we used to serve them in the 60s, with kind of bus routes that haven't much changed, bus routes that follow the tram routes that we got rid of, that now we're spending a lot of time and effort putting trams back on. So the transport network hasn't actually, in some respects, evolved as quickly as we have evolved as a society. And that ability and the concept that Yannis spoke about mobility as a service, is it's choosing the right mode for the right journey at the right time, and not being, well, I always use the car, or I always use the train, depending on what it is you need to do. We will hopefully have a more bespoke offer for each one of those journeys, and also hopefully in a way that is clean and environmentally sensitive. So there are definitely some opportunities. The current projects, such as the forerunner at the moment from a public sense, is Coventry working with Dudley and many of our automotive sector colleagues on a concept called Very Light Rail. So our tramways are expensive. They work really well, but they're difficult to deliver because of the cost. Very Light Rail would look to have something that's smaller, more flexible, lets you still maintain all the utilities, all the pipes and cables that are under the footway, and provide potentially an autonomous vehicle that runs on top. Still a long way to go on that, but it's good to see, as the West Midlands, we are investing in these research and development projects to try and create a better transport system for the future.
Thank you very much, Carl. We're due to finish at 2:15, so a couple of minutes before I do my thanks. But, you know, wanting to end on a positive note, we are all big advocates for our region. And, you know, we have taken a hit. The whole of the UK has taken a hit, as is the whole world, from the pandemic. But is there anything that I'd like to turn to all of you now to say, you know, what are you looking forward to? What are you excited about that this region has got to offer beyond the pandemic? Yannis, turning to you first, just a couple of seconds, please.
Yeah, I think that we have an opportunity to take the lead on the green recovery within the West Midlands and Birmingham. I think that it's been a catalyst for that, and I think we should take advantage of it. And I think we've got a compelling event with the Commonwealth Games. Let's kind of, you know, head towards that, create a truly smart city that is, you know, not carbon neutral, but as close as possible, that gets the world to kind of, you know, recognise what we're doing.
Thank you, Yannis. Nigel, what are you excited about for the future of our region?
I think I'd echo Yannis's point about the Commonwealth Games. We're really looking forward to that. So it's a fantastic opportunity. But also, Yannis made a point about the fact that Bristol and Manchester have done a really good job, a really good PR job of saying how fantastic their city is. We shouldn't really stand for that. We should do exactly the same. We should do much better. I think we should go out there and shout as loud as possible about how fantastic the city of Birmingham is. I know Yannis's great initiative does that anyway, but I think lots more of us should do that, because there really are some fantastic things happening, not just the Commonwealth Games, but HS2, the insurgence of all of the development around the HS2, and it's the knock-on effect of all the other businesses that will be impacted and all the other organisations that are going to provide the downstream services for the HS2 deliverables. And that's what I think we need to shout about, and we should be more proud of our city.
Thank you, Nigel. Carl?
Yes, I mean, great comments from the other guests, which I fully echo. I mean, we were hit relatively hard in the last recession, but the positive story really was how fast we bounced back. And we do have some fantastic assets in this region, both the people, the businesses, some of the infrastructure, to really to make it as much of a V-shaped return to success as we can. And some of those events are going to be crucial. Coventry City of Culture coming before the Commonwealth Games, and then leading on to the delivery of HS2. We should be positive that we can get back to where we were and beyond, and hopefully, as we said, in a cleaner, greener, fairer way.
And a plug for WM5G and the amazing work that they're doing, making us the biggest urban 5G test bed in the UK, and again that massive strides in technology that is happening. On behalf of Downtown, on behalf of Trowers Hamlins, thank you very much to our panelists for an amazing and fascinating talk there about smart cities and our digital future. Thank you very much for joining us, and there will be further events on the Downtown website. Please do check them out. There's some really interesting stuff coming up. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Goodbye.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.